Welcome to our Compass Show. So excited for the show today. You know, it's a beautiful winter day out there as we record this show. One of the probably warmer days we've had this winter, and it's not snowing. And the sun was peeking out for a little bit, but we're starting to cloud over. So actually, it's a beautiful winter day as we record this. But with that, we're really excited. We have a very special guest. We have Kyle Box with us. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you, Barb.
Yeah. Kyle serves as our city clerk. But before we get into that, let's find out, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in a small northern Minnesota town, Deer River, Minnesota.
Okay.
It's about 5.5 hours north of here, an hour and a half south of the Canadian border. So
Okay.
I grew up there. That's where most of my family still lives, and
Okay.
now I'm in Marshall. Yeah.
That is really, I don't want to say hilarious, but that is like, the timing is crazy. I listened to the news last night, and they were talking about resorts in Deer River.
Yep.
So I was like, yeah, I just heard that town name. And then now I heard it again, and they were talking about how the resorts, they had gotten the ice and then the snow and then the ice again, so the trucks are going through and hitting the water and then hitting the ice. So.
It's been an interesting winter, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you grew up in Deer River.
Yep.
Where did you go after that, and how did you end up in Marshall?
Yeah, so I had actually attended a campus visit at Southwest Minnesota State University my senior year of high school, and I loved the campus, so that's where I ended up going to school. So I am a SMSU alum of 2013 with a political science major and a management minor.
Okay.
And I never really left. I did it a couple of years in Iowa working for Schwann's and moved back to Marshall, and so on and off for about 10 years I've been here now.
Okay, well, wonderful. And I learned something new. A fellow employee, and I also found out when I went, it was SMSU alum, and now it's SSU, so I still stumble over that. So we're both alums, so see? It's amazing the things I even find out when I do these shows, but it's always fun in the process. So you're here in Marshall, and now you're currently serving as our city clerk.
Yes.
What does that position do? I mean, it's hard to tell everything you do, but kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah, so I've been the city clerk for the city of Marshall now for just over 2.5 years. My main job duties include the secretary to the city council. I maintain kind of a record in the ordinance or the order of all the resolutions, ordinances, council minutes, really anything that goes to the city council to procure those documents. I also serve as the election official for the city of Marshall. So election is coming up here with our first presidential nomination primary in March. So we're kind of getting things squared away with that and getting things organized. Also some other job duties that I have, I've had the pleasure to be the liaison to our topic today for our Complete Count Committee for the 2020 Census. Also the liaison to our racial equity cohort that we've partnered with the League of Minnesota Cities. We did that mostly in 2019. So, so yeah, those are kind of the bigger job duties. There's about a page and a half more I could go into, but they are the kind of the day-to-day tasks, things that we take care of here.
So actually, there's a lot of important little snippets and data, and they're not little, but they're just a huge conglomeration that makes everything flow. So when someone calls in, and I know I have done that, I've said, oh, we're going to do this event, and we want to use this vendor, food vendor. What's the ordinance? I have no clue. So we go to Kyle and say, hey, Kyle, can you help us with this? And so, and he knows right where they are, and it's just so handy to be able to tap into that with a instant, hey, Kyle.
Yeah, we try to make things easy to get to and make everyone as knowledgeable as we can. So
you also said last year you worked on the equity. What was that about a little bit, if you can give us just a snippet?
So our racial equity cohort was a group of city employees and representatives from adult basic education and from the university as well, partnering with the League of Minnesota Cities on really looking at racial equity and through what that means for this part of the state, for smaller Minnesota cities.
Sure.
Coming out to southwest Minnesota, that was really the region that we focused on. So kind of learning that background, being able to reach out to different communities within the city of Marshall, approaching them, and really with our goal in mind of getting them kind of used to how, or wanting to encourage them to be a part of our boards, commissions,
Right.
city council, amongst other things. But that was kind of our focus going into it. But the picture is so much more broader than that.
Yeah.
So getting to learn, the opportunity to learn those tools and to meet people along the way, it was a really, really great experience. So now we're done. We've concluded that late 2019.
Okay.
So now we have 2020 to kind of put that training into practice. And,
Sure.
we'll kind of talk about that more, I think, next week at our Cultures on the Prairie conference that's coming up. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure that'll come in really handy with our next topic, right? That equity training. So our real topic for today is the census.
Yes.
So why are we doing a census?
Well, we do a census. It's constitutionally mandated. Since 1790 was the first time the census was done. And really, the purpose for the census is to count the population. It's a tool that Congress has to ensure that we have an accurate count for a variety of reasons. It's for federal funding, for appropriating congressional leader districts within the states. There's many different things that the data is used for throughout the census. So it's huge. It plays a huge part into it, and it's the entire nation that participates in that. It's all 50 states, Washington D.C., and the 5 territories that the United States.
Yeah. Okay, so
oversees
there's
as
our
well.
challenge question for those listening. Figure out the 5 territories.
Yeah, there we go. I got the answers here too.
Okay.
So.
Maybe we'll give them at the end if we don't forget.
Yeah.
So we'll go with that.
Yeah.
I find the census, people go, okay, it's just a count.
Mm-hmm.
All right, why can't we just say, this is my name, this is my address, check. But there's other data that they also collect in that census.
Yeah.
And what kind of data do they ask for, and why should I answer that?
Yeah, so it's 9 questions that are asked on the short form, and that's what a majority of that we will get.
Right.
And really, what that data is used for, it's name, its address, phone number, age, sex, how many people living in the household. It's really generic information that's only brought down to the neighborhood level, so it's not identifying you as an individual when it's all compiled. But really, what that information is it's given to different organizations to maybe we can focus on, well, this part of the population only has this broadband connection. I mean, they can break it down to what percentage of the population has a smartphone and a computer.
Yeah.
So it's really great information, but they can break that kind of information down to then allocate resources to those types of areas.
Projects that may be going
Projects,
on in the state.
whether it's hospitals, roads, emergency services, schools. There's tons of different programs out there that use census data. So the information they collect is important. And kind of going with the questions, it's not, and we get this question actually a lot, is do you have to answer every question on the census? And the answer is no, you actually don't.
Okay.
We encourage people to answer what they feel comfortable answering.
Okay.
But if you don't answer every question, expect a follow-up visit from a census worker, whether that's a phone call or a door knock. So really, we just want to make sure people are comfortable answering what they're answering.
Right.
But if you don't fill out every question, then expect
It's okay.
It's okay, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a follow-up. It doesn't mean that you get out of answering the question.
Correct, yes.
I find that very interesting, too, as you were saying, how they can determine who has a cell phone, who maybe has internet service, some of those types of things. I know I myself in our programming, it's always fun for us to see how many people are age X in Lyon County, and then you get down to the city information, and is there a portion of that we're missing? So even at the center, that census becomes a play. into the whole picture. When does the census start, and when does, if someone comes knocking on my door in October and saying they're with the census, should I let them in? I mean,
Yeah.
What's the timeline on this?
So for this purpose, really the census starts in March.
Okay.
There's programs that we did as a city in 2019 and 2018 to help prepare for this with the Census Bureau, but for these purposes, we'll just say the start date is March.
Yeah.
80% of the population is going to actually be invited to participate via postcard from the Census Bureau online.
Oh.
This is the first time the census is actually going to be, filling out the census form is going to be available online. And that's what they're able to determine, what part of the population has access to high-speed internet to complete that survey online. So it's still available by mail or even over the phone as well to complete the census. So that process starts in March.
Okay.
Census Day, April 1st.
Okay.
And then April 1st, if you haven't filled out your census, you'll get a second, third, and final reminder to complete your census before the door knocking starts.
Okay.
Really, the door knocking is going to start from the end of April, and that will go all the way through Labor Day.
Through Labor Day.
Yeah,
oh,
so
I
it's
was
all
almost correct.
You were almost correct. Yeah. So and with census workers as well, they have distinguishing identification. Their hours are generally from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. They won't work any earlier or later than that. They always ask them present a badge with the census logos and their numbers. And if you have questions, call. If you're concerned that person might not be a census worker, call the Census Bureau and they can verify. So. Yeah.
And that's good to know. Will that when you get that postcard, so you get the postcards, will the Census Bureau have a number on there?
It'll have a number on there, and you'll have a distinguished or a distinguishing identifier code that you go to their website and enter in, and then your information will populate, and then you'll complete the census online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How much longer is the long form than the short form?
That's a great question. I actually have never seen a long form, so I've only seen we haven't. I believe the short form was introduced in 2000.
Okay.
So we've done 2 censuses now without the long form. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. I know I've seen a long form.
Yep.
But I've been at the center 25 years, so I help one of our citizens down there with it. So that cues me in. It must have been a while ago. So it is. So we're giving this information, and as most of us these days, and at least I know the population that I work with, they go, is this data going to be safe?
Yeah.
Are they going to give it to this party and that party and to these people who advertise, and I'm going to get more robocalls than I'm getting right now? I mean, what are they, how are they protecting that, and is it safe?
Yeah, so that is a point that we want to make clear. Your data is protected. It is protected by Title 13 under the U.S. Code, which mandates that your data is secure. The White House administration doesn't have access to it. City governments do not have access to it. Your landlord does not have access to it. Your information is your information. The Census Bureau employees and people that have participated in programs with the Census Bureau, such as myself, have to take oaths or sign saying that information will be protected for life. If breaking that is penalty is up to 5 years in prison or a $250,000 fine. So that information is protected, but there's a but. So that information becomes public data after 72 years.
Oh, geez, don't live past 72.
I'm not going to care too much what's going to happen to me what my
well,
information
you'll be
is
90
in 72.
then, right?
Yeah. So it'll be some time from now, but so it's protected, and the only people that can use it are the Census Bureau and their programs, really.
Okay.
So it's not just being given to anybody, but that information is protected. Only the Census Bureau has access to it. That's been challenged in court, and it's been upheld every time.
Well,
so,
that's good.
Yeah, so your information is protected.
Yeah, that's always good to know, because I think especially in this day and age with, I mean, the robocalls are just crazy and the scams are getting crazier by the day that we see. So it's like, well, what's going to happen with this data? Well, as we continue talking about the census, how does, I mean, you said all this information is with the Census Bureau. And then they put out, I'm assuming, a report.
Yeah.
And then how does the city then tap that? And because they don't get the details, right? They just get the general.
Down to the, we'll call it the neighborhood level, a tract level. So it's all shared by the Census Bureau. In those off years, it's called an American Community Survey that the Census Bureau does year-round every year.
Yeah.
So what that information is, Marshall as an example, Marshall is broken into 3 census tracts.
Oh, really?
So really, I can kind of visualize it, but it's kind of the north half of town, and then the east and west side of town are broken up. So it follows mainly Saratoga Street and East College Drive is where the borders kind of are. But so we're broken into 3 census tracts. That information we can determine with the population age, sex, race, level of income, and education, and like I said earlier, what percent has access to a smartphone and computers. So that's shared with us by the Census Bureau, and for anyone, that's a public information. So anyone has access to that. Yeah.
So they can go onto the census site and get the data. They just have to weed through and get down.
It's actually getting very user friendly. It's a really easy to use interactive map that you can go to any part of the country on and get that information. Yeah.
I'm really impressed that they break it down in the city into 3 tracks. I mean, I was always happy when you could just pull Marshall out of Lyon County. Because its information is so radically, I always think, different than when you include it in the county and be able to extract that and then see what is happening with Marshall during the day. And I think the census would reflect some of that. So it's interesting to see that. So what does the city do then? They get this data information. Why is it important to the city of Marshall?
Well, it's important to us for a number of reasons. For us, really, at the city, right at the top here, the economic development aspect of it. It's kind of determining what we have to offer to maybe some outlying businesses that may want to move into Marshall. It helps those businesses determine where they want to put industrial and commercial type projects or factories, stores, those types of industry. And it also helps us determine where we need to focus our efforts on communicating more with the public. So it tells us what our estimated response rates are going to be with the census and where we can focus those efforts on communication with our community. So it's important information to us, whether it's economic development, communication, even our roads and state aid programs or federal programs like that. So there are a number of programs that we benefit from.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us tend to forget that. And I think one of the fun things I always like with the census is you look at our city as a whole, and this probably comes from my marketing degree from here, but these businesses aren't going to come into town unless there's some of them, unless there's a certain population met before they even look. So that census has a huge impact on some of the economic development that may even be possible before you even start having the discussions. So I find that pretty amazing. The other thing with the census, which I don't know how often we think about it, at least I don't know that I do very often. You probably do with political science, but just those congressional districts and the impact of that. I mean, I even know in our state organization with senior centers, we talk about how the cities operates somewhat different, but they're still the same, versus Rochester, Duluth, and then we say, then we're rural Minnesota. And so then those congressional districts, how would that, how could that be shook up? How would that possibly be impacted by the census?
So once again, the state of Minnesota is on the verge of either maintaining or losing a congressional seat. So what that means is is we could have the opportunity to have decreased representation in the state of Minnesota, going from 8 districts to 7.
Right.
For those of you that may not know, we have a very large district already. It stretches essentially from the Canadian border almost to the Iowa border, one county shy,
Yeah.
and then over to almost central Minnesota. So it's a very large district already. Their estimates are that if that congressional seat is lost because of a decreased count in the census, those districts would grow about 100,000 in population for each district. So if you think you have a hard time being heard now by your representative, try adding on another 100,000 more people to that. So
Wow.
to get your message across. So it's very important to us to maintain that congressional seat.
Yeah. That's just an enormous impact,
Yeah.
because then it's not only having them hear us, but then that has to also impact as to what is passed,
Right.
where the funds funnel down. I mean, it's a huge vacuum
Yeah.
or funnel, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really, really amazing. How many dollars are distributed, do we know, with the census? Every year it's
Yeah.
done, how many dollars are impacted by census counts?
So in the state of Minnesota, it's about $15.5 billion a year.
Wow.
Billion with a B.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So,
Billion.
Yeah. There are 55 federal programs that we benefit from the census.
Okay.
From the census participation from those dollars, the biggest being in the state of Minnesota, Medicaid.
Medicaid,
About
okay.
$6 billion comes from that funding.
Okay.
Programs such as daycare,
Okay.
school lunch and breakfast programs,
yeah,
highway
huge.
highway participation, industrial building roads,
Yep.
hospitals,
Wow.
emergency services,
Sure.
school projects. I mean, the list goes on and on for, 55 different programs that we can go off and list that we get. That $15 billion a year is given to the state and then distributed throughout the state
Right.
to those areas. So really what that $15 billion breaks down to is it's about $2,800 a person a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, if you think of a family of 4, that's a significant number over 10 years, and we're locked in with that number for 10 years.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So the census is only done once every 10 years, so that is our number, and
Yeah.
we want to make sure that we have an accurate count. So,
Right.
continuing on with that undercount chance. Without any follow-up, the Census Bureau is estimating that we'll have approximately 3,000 people in the city of Marshall that would not be counted if there were no follow-up.
Really? Wow,
So with
that's
that,
a lot.
That's a lot, yeah. And Lyon County,
Wow.
respectively with Lyon County, it's about 5,000.
Okay.
So what that means is about $7.3 million a year for the city, what would equal to the city of Marshall that we would lose out on.
Wow.
So times 10, $73 million over 10 years that the city, that portion, that undercount represents.
Right.
Minnesota as a whole, it's just shy of 1 million. It's about 965,000 people are projected to be missed in that initial count.
Wow.
And that's, like I said, without any follow-up. So
Right.
that's why we do the Census Bureau does the first, second, third reminders,
Right.
and then does the door knocking and calling to make sure we get that accurate number. But
Right.
that's kind of the reason why we want to make sure we have that accurate count is to make sure
Yeah.
those funds are allocated appropriately.
I just see that as so very, very powerful. $73 million. And we think of 55 programs. And if we don't have the count and our portion is reduced, we know where it's going, right?
Yeah.
It's going to the taxpayers,
Yeah.
right? So that's why it's so very, very important to be counted.
Right.
What about this? You say that there's 3,000 in Marshall that wouldn't be counted if you didn't go door knocking. I just think of that dollar amount and that impact alone. How difficult is it for the census people when they go out? Because just talking about our neighborhoods, if I look in Marshall, I could probably name off the top of my head 5 different you know. Some of them I probably wouldn't be able to talk to, but I could, with my hands, maybe get my message through.
Sure.
But so how do those census takers connect with those community people in our community that probably struggle with this sheet of paper and have no clue why they have to do this?
So I will say the Census Bureau is really on top of their game this time around. And not that they haven't been before, but just kind of adapting to a new era, really, with more languages being spoken and more population living in rental housing. So being able to find that group of people and being able to communicate with anyone else is really important. They've developed tools to almost like flashcards in different languages where they can go up to a door, and if they see a non-English speaking person living there, they can, if they don't know the language, they can kind of point at their list and say, what language do you speak? They can point to that language, and then they can go through their cards and try and communicate that way.
Okay.
So it's really it seems really basic, but it's really intuitive. I mean, it's the basic things that are going to help to make sure that we can get that accurate count.
Right.
And along with going through neighborhoods, I believe the Census Bureau is actually in Marshall right now at the Merit Center doing their training for their door knockers.
Oh, okay.
So they're here for 3 days doing that. But a majority of those people are local people.
Right.
They know the neighborhoods. They know where people are, where they're living. Right. So it's really helpful to have that group of people that know where they're going and know what's going on, to be able to, and not just aimlessly walk around and try and get everybody. So yeah.
Well, that's really powerful. Just knowing that the census is done once every 10 years. Let's remember that. It's only once every 10 years.
Yeah.
These dollars are locked in for 10 years.
Yep.
So I always say, if you're out there saying, oh, do I do the census? Do I not? Think about that. Where do you want the city of Marshall in 10 years?
Right.
How do you think we're going to get there?
Yep.
And so this is that huge impact. My other and final question for you, and I've seen some strange things come into the center. The census, we get this postcard. What's the address going to be in the corner? Do you know that?
Maybe I don't understand. I'm sorry.
Okay, when we get the postcard in the mail,
Yep.
is there going to be a return address in the corner? Do you know or do you not know?
I do not know.
Okay. The only reason I ask that is I've had some strange censuses come through, or people seeking more like a survey. And I'm always amazed that they said, oh, you don't have to do that one. I said, no, it says MetLife here in the corner.
Sure, okay, I see what you mean.
You see where I'm going?
Yep, I see what you mean.
So I'm not sure if there's something that'll really cue them that it's from the census, so they know it's the census and not a...
Yep, so there will be official census language on anything you receive from the Census Bureau. And I'm fairly confident that a lot of the language you'll get is from our regional office, which is out of Chicago.
Oh, okay.
So you might be seeing some information coming from that at an address maybe in Chicago.
Okay.
But if there's any hesitation, you can visit 2020census.gov or call the Census Bureau as well to verify. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's always good to know. Kyle, it's been fun visiting on the census with you. I think it's just amazing information. Especially since it's every 10 years, I always think it's good for us to kind of go, oh yeah, we need a reminder as to why this is important. And with it only being 9 questions, nobody can tell me it's going to take them a long time. So, get those filled out, get them in. It's going to impact where you live. And so be sure to do that. And also may impact our districts for voting, which is huge. So do that. Again, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Barb.